Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another one of IPDay's webinars. On Wednesdays, this is Ron Cruz, your facilitator for today's webinar. I just wanted to say first, thank you for tuning in. We've got lots of stuff packed in for today's webinar, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. By the way, my name is Ron Cruz, and I am from Hillsborough County Public Schools. I'm the coordinator of the Caribe Refugee Program, and I'm also a statewide trainer and facilitator for subject areas of ABE, GED, and ESOL through Florida IPDAY. Before we begin our actual webinar, I just wanted to give you some reminders that if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A tab on your toolbar and just click on it, and a window will pop up and it will allow you to type in your questions immediately. And then as the questions are archived, we will answer them throughout the webinar. There's also some pauses in between within the webinar, so it will allow me to answer some of your questions. So feel free to type in your Q&A at any time. Your microphones will be muted and you will only be in listen mode throughout the webinar. So please use your Q&A if you have your Q&A tab if you have any question. And also want to remind you that today's webinar is also being recorded and it will be archived. You can download, review this webinar again after 48 hours from this webinar. All right, so let's go over our agenda for today. So at the beginning of this webinar, I'm going to talk about a little bit of background on how this matrix became, developed and how it came about and why are we pushing for this particular type of instructional tool. After that, we're going to talk about the correlation of this matrix to your curriculum frameworks. And then we're going to dive in and look at the matrix. So I'm going to show you how to download the matrix for yourself, the electronic version. And also we're going to talk about the benefits of how you can use this, this tool to guide your instruction. Also, I'm going to point out some certain key characteristics of the matrix that you may not notice. So I'll point it out to you because you might think of other ways you can use this matrix into your classroom. And then I'm going to talk about other applications that we're thinking about in terms of future development with this matrix, specifically various overlays that we're trying to develop. We're going to spend a few minutes towards the end of this webinar to answer some of your questions. And then we're going to do a quick evaluation at the end for about 1 minute to poll your responses, and then we're going to end the webinar. All right, without further ado, I'm going to start talking about the background behind the development of this matrix. So late last year, towards the early of 2018, prior to the release of the mathematics workshop, the ABE Mathematics workshop that we did throughout the state, we conducted a survey with the educators in Florida, adult educators in Florida. And I just want to give you some insight on what are the types of information that we've gathered from this particular survey. So in this particular survey, we asked the following questions. The first question is, rank the following according to the lowest performing skills of your students. And according to you all and some of you who took the survey, based on this particular question or item on the survey, fractions and mathematics computation rank the highest, or pretty much as according to teachers, according to their classroom data. They're saying that fractions is the top response, that lowest performing skill with students. Students are also struggling with problem solving and reasoning. And then ranking third is algebraic operations. So, that pertains to solving equations, maybe single step or two-step equations. So, and then you can see that data. I just wanted to also point out that this webinar has an accompanying workbook or activity book. And the page number that you see on these slides are the same page numbers referring to the one on your activity book. So if you print out the slides or the handouts, it might look too small for you, but keep in mind that this data is also available to you in color in your activity book. And I'm going to show you that later and how to download that activity book, just in case you want to do some on-site small group professional learning community meetings around this webinar. So we ask another question. We ask the teachers, what are the most challenging skills that you're having difficulty with in terms of teaching it and preparing this lesson to the students? And one of the identifiers that would rank top would be understanding word problems, teaching the students really how to understand word problems. Also teaching students how to translate real-world situation problems into equations. So not so much as solving the equation themselves, but really translating the real-world situation into an equation, especially for problems that have certain nuances or lots of distractors that are not needed into the equations. And then another, ranking third is understanding parts and relationship between geometric figures. So we're talking about similarities, congruence, looking at the attributes of a particular shape, comparing lengths of sides, comparing angles. We can even also talk about areas and perimeters of these geometric figures. So those are the things that the top three responses from you are the most challenging. Another question we ask is, what is the most challenging on the teacher side to teach to the students? And one of the things that that showed up in this question is that function is the top answer, meaning teachers are not very comfortable teaching this subject area or this domain in the ABE math curriculum. Second to that would be statistics and probability, and followed by operations and algebraic thinking. So many factors can contribute to why function, statistics, and probability and algebraic thinking are the top three responses as the most challenging to teach to students. One of them could be the level of expertise of a teacher. A lot of us adult educators are not necessarily math majors, and we come into the adult education world sideways. So sometimes we come into the adult education world from a private sector. And then there's also a good number of us, or number of teachers that are teaching K-12, that are teaching part-time in the evening for adult education. And those are the ones that may or may not have some level of expertise in teaching functions and statistics. But these two are highly specialized domains in mathematics, and I kind of expected this type of result. So that's one that's showing up on the survey response. Another thing that we ask on the survey is, what are the things that are affecting your instruction? So really it's answering that question as to why do you think is functions and statistics and probability are the most challenging for you, or you're less comfortable to teach. And one of the things the top answer for this one is going to be lack of familiarity with its subject matter. So really, we're going back into that mathematics background. When was the last time you saw functions? When was the last time functions was taught to you, or you've actually used functions to, in a real world setting? So those are very high indicators, or very powerful indicators, why teachers, ABE teachers, are not able to feel some level of confidence or comfort teaching functions and also statistics and probability. Not so much as statistics and probability, but more so functions. There's also, the second top answer also is saying here that there are limited resources in the subject matter. So we're talking about textbooks, website, technology, apps, lesson plans, manipulatives, and or ready-made worksheets that really assess what these standards with the standards in both functions and also statistics pertain to. And then the third top answer is limited opportunities to practice the strategies learned from professional development. So yes, we do focus on these things in these areas where teachers are less comfortable. I could still remember, like in the past year, we incorporated a lot of ratio and proportion and statistics into the face-to-face workshops, but in the face-to-face workshop, teachers need to have a certain level of, or a certain opportunity to practice this. So what we're finding out is not, not a lot of the things that we're doing in the face-to-face workshops are being translated immediately into the classroom because there's just not enough opportunities to do that. So that's the answers. I mean, that's the kind of like recap for the answers to that question. But also I wanted to point out some special mention that some of the teachers entered in the comment section, where it says differentiated instruction for stacked levels, lack of motivation on the part of the students, weak foundations on the students. So if their foundations are really, really weak, it's very difficult to teach them statistics and also functions, because statistics and functions combines everything that they've already learned in mathematics, starting from place value all the way to solving equations. And then we incorporate the graphing part, and then we incorporate the real world aspect to it. So it compounds the difficulty for the students. Another thing is difficulty in explanation. So teachers express that it's very difficult to explain. So like some of us that are coming in from the private sector that uses some of these math skills readily in the job or in the workplace, they just know. I just know that this answer is, and this technique or this equation works, but the equation as to, the explanation as to why we do so, or why we follow a certain procedure, teachers lack that expertise or the words to explain why things are done such. There are limited practical applications on certain mathematics standards. That is true. Not everything in the standards are readily applicable to whatever career or workplace or real life situation. Teaching online is also another part, makes it very difficult, especially if you're an online ABE or GED teacher. It's very difficult to have that interaction because there has to be some modeling involved, and you got to have the opportunity to answer questions on the spot while student is actually solving problems or working out equations. Because on an online setting, that's just something that you cannot have, that immediate, that instantaneous feedback that you get from face-to-face classes. Lack of retention is always coming up as a special mention, as a comment from teachers. Like teachers explain that something that you teach today, they're gonna perform really well. They seem like they got it, and you did a minor formative assessment towards the end, and you saw like, okay, students seem to have gotten what I've taught today. But then you come the next day, or especially if there's a weekend in between your class meetings, come Monday, students already forgot what they've learned. So the retention is not there. So teachers are struggling with that as well. Another thing that we deal with in adult education is poor attendance. So attendance is a problem because, it's not like the students didn't want to come to class. It may be true for some, but for the majority of our students, they have life to deal with. That's why they're not able to come to class. Sometimes there's family emergency, sickness in the family. Sometimes their work schedule comes into conflict with their classes. So really, attendance is something that we really have to pay attention to, especially when we are tackling specifically more difficult math topics such as statistics and function. And then also we talked about, we also encountered anxiety. Some teachers have mentioned that mathematics anxiety is what's preventing them from really mastering and delivering their full potential in these math classrooms. Another question we ask is, what do you think are the effective supports for instruction? What are the things that make you better at what you do? And the top response from the survey shows that face-to-face workshops. So face-to-face workshops are really, really good because you have the opportunity to ask your questions. You have the opportunity to work with colleagues or other participants during the face-to-face workshops. You're able to share ideas and gather some techniques that may or may not have been included in the training, and it's just you just got it because you were in the group with another teacher, and another teacher said, oh, this is what I do in class, and you just got it. So there's so many benefits to face-to-face workshop. The drawback on the face-to-face workshop, however, is that time, because if you're in a face-to-face workshop, you're not in your classroom. So there points out a question that's like, do we get a sub? Or what do your students do, when you're not there? And, as much as we want to, you don't get so much learning from a sub, especially if a sub is coming into a more difficult math topic and they don't have a good background at what's already been covered with your students. Print materials, according to you all, are another really great resource and support for your instruction. So the lesson plans, the handouts, the slides that you're going to get today in today's webinars, the worksheet, the study guides, the activity book that you're getting here is really an extension of this webinar, because we cannot stress this enough. We cannot cram in an hour's worth or, a 6 hours worth of content into an hour and expect you to learn and really embody these strategies. So it's really difficult to do that. So that's why we created these print materials, so you can extend your learning outside the webinar and outside the face-to-face workshops, and also make you become an expert within your own site, so that you can do and lead your own professional learning communities for those teachers that did not have the opportunity to attend the face-to-face workshops or view the webinar live. Another thing that the third top answer in here is short webinars like this. So according to you, participating in short webinars is really helpful. And that's what I like about webinar. It's like on the spot, okay, we've got it, it's concise, it's narrowed down to the things that I need. It's an hour, so it doesn't take so much of your time. It's scheduled towards the end of the day, so it doesn't really conflict with some of your classes in the morning. And then it's early enough that it doesn't conflict with your evening classes. So, according to all of you, or to most of you, you said that webinars is the third top answer as effective supports for your instruction. So keep attending and keep tuning into these webinars. And if you cannot tune in live, keep in mind that this webinar is being recorded, and you can always view it at a later time. And you have that activity book to work with, so that you can still feel the same feel as if you're actually watching the webinar live. There are some special mentions to this question. Teachers really wanted to stress out that what they want to get out of these professional development opportunities and these supports are easy and quick to implement strategies. They also want guest experts to be either in the face-to-face or in the short webinars, and we do that through IP Day as well. Classroom demonstration is a little bit difficult to do on the part of IP Day, but that's something that you can really arrange within your own site, coordinating with your administrators, doing some common planning time so that you can all plan. And I know I touch on, I browse upon a very touchy subject, because not all of us have the luxury of planning time. Planning time is something that's very rare in adult education, especially when majority of us are part-time. Blended approach, meaning teachers are saying that they would like materials to be posted ahead of time, so they can do a prior study, so they can activate their prior knowledge prior to participating into a face-to-face workshop and also in a webinar. And we've started doing that already. For the face-to-face workshop, we've started communicating with the participants and each of the site locations that we're going to, and we're giving them some steps to prepare the participants. Maybe read the activity book, or preview the slides, or we conduct a survey, and then towards the end, we also do a follow-up towards the end, where after the webinar, we're looking for continuation, or we gather feedback from your implementation of the strategies that you've that you've learned about during the face-to-face workshop. And the same thing is being done in our webinars. That's why we're posting the materials, the slides, the activity book ahead of time, so you can really brush up, prepare, download everything that you need to download prior to the webinar. So when you sit in, you've got everything you need at your fingertips. Another thing that's special mention are videos that model multiple skills. So multiple skills meaning multiple mathematics standards being applied to a particular problem. That's where the IPDAY grab and go videos come into play. The grab and go videos, and I'm going to walk you through how to access that later on when I show you the how to access the matrix. But the grab and go videos are really powerful. They're short, they're quick, 3-minute videos that incorporate word problems and including the solution. And it also talks about, it also explains how the solution is arrived. You can pause the video at many points in time and use it in the classroom. The grab and go videos for IPDAY also comes with activity books that provides you with additional word problems to use with your class, just in case you plan to implement the grab and go videos with your students. Last but not least is paid planning. So I'm not going to belabor this point. Paid planning is something that we cannot do on the part of IPDAY. This is something that you work with your individual school administrators. All right, so that was kind of like the background of the survey. So when I was reading through this survey, I noticed that teachers are having lots of difficulty trying to crunch through the entire ABE curriculum. It's a humongous piece of document. There are, I think, 31 or 32 pages in the curriculum frameworks, and it's written in a way, that's what it is. It's a framework style. So it's not really an actual curriculum. It gives you everything you need to set up your own curriculum at your own site. But who has the time to develop their own curriculum? Each site, each district must allocate resources to allow teachers and other professionals to collaborate and formulate their own curriculum. For most of us, we actually just use the curriculum frameworks as our actual curriculum, as our guide. But the curriculum frameworks and looking at the curriculum framework poses a lot of problems because, first of all, they don't necessarily align with the textbook or the materials that you use in the classroom. It may be a textbook or an online online program that you're using. Another thing is that they might not be written or sequenced the same way as your materials or the materials that we've gotten used to. So those are the two major problems that we see. Second is that teachers don't find this readily available, even though it's readily accessible from the FDOE website. Some of us who teach at sites who does not have internet access makes it a little bit more difficult, because then you have to save your curriculum framework somewhere else, or to a portable drive, or print it out for yourself. And then flipping through the 31, 32-page document doesn't also make it easier, because the actual curriculum frameworks is arranged according to NRS levels. So you got level 1 and 2 in the first half of the section, and then the 3 and 4 in the second half of the section. And if you're not paying attention to it, you won't notice that certain domains are covered in the first section of the curriculum, and then there are some that are not covered in the second section of the curriculum. It's set up that way because it's I think the best way to set it up. But there's just so much information in the curriculum that's just really the best way for the state to kind of put it together in a user-friendly format. That's the most user-friendly it can get. So I thought about it and say, okay, maybe we can do something about this. I want a more visual representation because I'm a very visual learner, and a lot of our students also are. And I also want to have a way to check like how much I've covered already, where my students are, and things like that. So I came up with the idea of creating a matrix, and the matrix is something that summarizes the information into a singular page. So one of the things that you will see in the curriculum framework is a mapping of the different domains. So this one gives us a good picture of what's covered in each level, NRS level. And if you wanted to go through or pertain to them as grade levels, there are also the grade level equivalents labeled in this chart. And as you can see, if you're looking at this domains chart, you can see, okay, hey, domain 1, number and operations, is only covered between level 1 through level 3, or from 0 grade to 6th grade of mathematics. So when the students are at level 4 of the NRS, then they won't have and they won't be dealing with this domain anymore. And that's the same is true with the other two domains as operations and algebraic thinking and measurement data. So this gives us a kind of like a big picture of to, okay, I can see now, I see geometry is being taught, you know, at all levels of ABE, and that's good. But this chart does not answer the question as to what are the things that needs to be taught at each level. What should my students be mastering at each level? How can I check? That one, you can get that by just actually digging through the 31-page document of the curriculum frameworks, or I've got a better alternative for you, is to look at the mathematics curriculum matrix. Okay, so hope you're ready. Before we really dive into the mathematics curriculum matrix, I want to first review your knowledge on the terminology and the jargon that we'll be using as we go through. Okay, so what I did was I took a one part of the standards from the curriculum frameworks, and that's what you're looking at right now. And I want you to point out that the ABE levels are written right there at the top of the page, right underneath the title of each table. And then after that, you see the domain is listed. So right now we're looking at domain 1, number and operations in base 10. So now the section in bold writing underneath the domain are what we call the anchor standards. So, and for the purposes of this webinar, I'm just going to refer to them as the standards. Now, underneath the standards, there are subsections. These subsections are what we call the benchmarks or the benchmark skills. Sometimes they are referred to as related standards, but for the purposes of this webinar, we're going to refer to them as benchmarks. So I'm gonna be talking about the ABE level or the NRS level. I'm gonna be referring to domains when I go through and go over the matrix with you. And I'm also gonna refer to the standards, and I'm also gonna point out to the benchmark. These are the 4 terms that we kind of really need to get down pat when we're looking into the curriculum matrix and really understanding how the matrix works. Okay. So the formatting of the formatting and the arrangement of the math standards and the benchmark skills are 25 pages into the curriculum framework. So there are some pages that are introductory pages that gives you the other standards, such as the career standards and the educational planning standards. Those make up the additional pages. But if you only are looking at how many pages are really containing the standards for ABE mathematics, there are only 25 pages there. But still, that's still 25 pages to flip through. So to make things easier, I'm gonna present to you the tool that I've created so that you can do your job and be less stressed about, okay, am I covering the right stuff? Am I teaching the right things? Because table 11 and 12 is coming, and I need to be on top of my game, and just like you, I want to be on the top of my game as well. So what I did was I spent some time to simplify the curriculum for us so that we can really spend the time teaching rather than trying to understand the curriculum frameworks. So this is the curriculum matrix that you're going to see. So I know it's smaller. It's for the purpose of this slide, you're not going to be able to read through this. So this is just an image so that you can see what it looks like as a whole. So let me just go over this real quick with you. On the left side, you will see all of the domains listed. Domains 1 all the way through 10. From number and operations in base 10 all the way to functions. And so I hope you're looking at that first column. That column going up and down is your domains. Now across the top of the chart, you will see your NRS levels. NRS level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. So level 1 pertains to grades 1 and 2. Level 2 will be 2 and 3. 3 and 4. Level 3 pertains to grade levels 5 and 6. And then level 4 pertains to grade levels 7 and 8. So there's always two grade levels in between the NRS levels. So so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you how to download your copy of the matrix, your copy that is a little bit more readable. So I'm going to go out of the presentation mode and open the electronic copy of the ABE Math Curriculum. So what I want you to do is just, for now, I just want you to watch, and because I'm going to demonstrate how to download your own copy, and then I'm going to give you a minute to do that yourself so that you can already have it saved into your computer or your portable drive. So I'm going to escape out of this screen, and then I'm going to show you the IPDAY website. So if you're looking at the IPDAY website, in order to download the mathematics curriculum matrix, you're going to go into ABE because this is an ABE curriculum. So you're going to go under ABE, and then you're going to go under webinars. So ABE, then click on webinars. Once you get into the webinars, it's the first one at the top, depending on when you're going to access this, but I really wanted you to download it right away. So right at the top, you'll see ABE Math Curriculum Framework Part 1. Click on that one, and it'll bring you to this webinar page that you're viewing right now. And then all the way to the bottom left corner, you will see the presentation PDF. That's your PDF version of the PowerPoint slides, the handouts for this, meaning the activity book that comes along with this webinar. And then your curriculum frameworks is also added here. So you have your ABE Math 2018. The 2018, I posted the most recent curriculum frameworks, the 18-19 curriculum frameworks, and then the high impact indicators. So where is the matrix? Let's look at this one, then click on that one. Okay, so I'm just waiting for that to load, but it's supposed to load the matrix itself and not so much as the activity book. Here's what I'm going to do. I am going to, I don't think it is posted right now. It's being pulled up. Yeah, this is not it. This is the activity book. I want to just take a moment to show you the activity book. So it has all your agenda, the data that we went over earlier is here. It's printed in bigger, bolder, and it's got some reflection questions for you, you know, and then it's got some matching type activities. Lots of reflection, lots of question. It's also got some other stuff here that we're going to develop. Also includes some GED items. So that's the activity book that I'm referring to. So apparently I did not have the opportunity to post the matrix, but here's what I'm going to do. When you come back and view the actual recording of the webinar after 48 hours, please expect your mathematics curriculum framework, matrix to be here. it's gonna look like this. So this is how this is a PDF version of what you're gonna get if you download that information. And I'm gonna go ahead and it will allow you to enlarge. Okay, so you can enlarge it. But keep in mind that this is designed to be printed on an 11-inch by 17-inch paper. It's called the tabloid paper. 11 by 17 is the size of that paper, and you can print it on any thickness of paper. You can just use regular printer paper. Because keep in mind, if you print this on on a regular letter size printer paper, you are not going to be able to read it. What you can also do is you can tile it out and print it into 4 separate sheets of letter, and then you can tape them together. So that's the challenge with this map, because there's a lot of standards that needs to be incorporated and shown into a map, but it's not enough. There's not enough space on a regular size letter sheet or letter size printer paper. So just keep that in mind when you're actually printing it. But the electronic version, if you're in PDF, you can easily already start manipulating through it, because on your PDF you can click on your if you have the most latest version of Acrobat Reader, it will allow you to write and highlight. It will allow you to put comments in there. It will allow you to type in additional information, just like what I'm doing right now. So, and you can already start working with the PDF version that you're gonna get. You can also draw into the PDF version, just like what I'm doing right now. For example, I want to underline specific terms, or I want to circle out, or I want to do an ordering. Let's say this is number 1, and this is number 2, and then this is number 3, and so on and so forth. So you can work with your PDF version already. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my presentation. So just so you know that, again, let me repeat that. When you go back after 48 hours, you will be able to download your own electronic copy of the curriculum matrix so that you can save it into your drive. I do apologize that it's not there already. So keep in mind that we'll try to post it as soon as we can. All right. So let me just talk about how you would use this in your classroom. So I'm going to pause for a minute before I do that, because I have some questions here. So I'm going to go ahead and start addressing some of the questions for now, and then go in. And if you have any idea already, now that you see the matrix and see kind of how it looks like as a whole, think about how would you use this to its fullest potential. I'd like to hear your thoughts. So, okay. There is a question here posted by one of the participants asking the question, which particular function is covered mostly in ABE? That's a really, really good question. So in the ABE level, we are covering up to a quadratic function, but not in terms of solving that function. So just so you know, the students must be able to differentiate between a linear function and a nonlinear function. That's why the quadratic and the other non-functions are being introduced, but that's the only part of the curriculum that the standards that students need to understand is that can I identify a linear function versus a nonlinear function? Well, the bigger question behind that is it a function to begin with? So what the standard states is that first the students must be able to determine whether something is a function. It could be an equation, it could be a listing of ordered pairs, it could be a table of values, and it could be a graph. So in that case, a student must be able to identify, okay, if this is a function and this is not a function. And then to extend that learning a little bit further, the student must be able to differentiate which functions are linear and which functions are not. And another part of the function of the, when I say it goes all the way to non-linear functions, is because in the standards, they talk about real world situations and modeling or finding out if a function can model a real life situation, such as throwing a ball up in the air and creating a function between distance from the ground versus the time. Is that going to create a linear function or a nonlinear function? So there's a lot of things going on in there. Okay, for example, I'm working at a grocery store and I'm getting paid $10 per hour. Can I create a function to show how much I'm going to earn if I work, let's say, 10 days? So that, you know, students can start putting together ordered pairs, or if they already are proficient with writing equation, they can write an equation to model that. Of course, we won't complicate it at the beginning by introducing deductions and all of the taxes and stuff. We just want to get like that gross pay. So that's another aspect of the function. Okay, so I think I already explained. There's a question here that asks, what is the blended approach to teaching ABE? Okay, I did kind of give you an idea of what it is on the training side. So how does it look like in the classroom? Well, when you have a blended approach in your classroom, that means you're blending face-to-face and online teaching together. So you could be like meeting with your students for like an hour and a half and doing a face-to-face teaching. And then the students go home and do some homework at home using an online program that you assign to them that particularly refers to or applies the skill that they just learned. So that's the blended approach component. Can we get a copy of the domain chart matrix? Yes, and that's what I was explaining already, that you will get that copy within 48 hours. Another question here is how can instructors be able to build out quiz answer options with equations included, just as the editor. Example, when making a multiple type question, be able to add equations into the answer choices. Are there any books around to use? So there's a lot of aspects to this question. I'm going to try to answer this question as much as I could understand. If you're referring to the actual assessment, if you're talking about the assessment itself, TABE 11 and 12, or CASA's math goals, if you're asking the question as how these equations are being asked, well, first of all, yes, equations can appear in the multiple choice, so students can pick from different equations, or it could also appear as a completion. And I'm now talking about on the GED side, there are fill in the blanks or completion sections on the test where students have to actually write the equation out or type it out. There's one last question here. There would be an NRS level 5. Yeah, well, technically the NRS level 5 is actually the first level of your GED. So that's what it is into the level. So once you enter into the 9th grade, that's already your adult secondary education, meaning that's your GED prep class. So that's pretty much what it is. That pertains to the 5th. Okay, and then I know there's more questions coming in. Keep them coming because I have another section where I'm going to pause and answer these additional questions as we go. So let me go ahead and give you a brief kind of like overview of why this matrix is going to be good for you. Okay, so what it does is it summarizes all the standards for you into a single page, okay? it gives you a more visual representation of like, am I covering something in the geometry domain or am I covering it in the measurement? Because that area, there are some standards that have a gray area, and you can't even determine, because you talk about length. Length is under measurement, but then you might be confused because length is also being talked about or discussed or being taught at the geometry domain. So where are you? So it allows you to kind of pinpoint where you are in the humongous curriculum that you're trying to teach. Where are you, which domain you are in, because then if you know which domain you're in, then you know what to stress out in that particular section. It shows you an overall picture of ABE math standards. So really, it gives you an attention. It's like, okay, these are everything that I have to teach. It also shows logical grouping of the standards. So which standards can I teach together? So if you're chunking standards together during your planning or during your curriculum planning or your planning time or your daily planning or your unit planning, you can already start chunking standards together without having to flip through 31 pages and look at two different sections of your curriculum frameworks. With the use of the ABE Math Curriculum Matrix, you're just looking at a singular page, and then you can pinpoint and see a small region where you can really incorporate or teach all together. It also allows you to understand how each standards relate to one another. So that's not readily realized when you are looking and reading through the curriculum frameworks. So looking at the map, you can see that. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. And then it allows you to organize your standards across different levels, because your students are not all coming into you at level 1. Sometimes your students are going to come to you at level 3, and you want to have an idea, okay, well, what standards have this, does this student have to have already mastered? How do I know? How do I design formative assessment for the students? And then it also allows you to show how much content and objectives are covered at each domain. So you can see which domains are massive, meaning they have a lot of standards that are embedded. And what you're going to realize is that geometry and then equations are the two domains that has massive content and objectives. So just a characteristic of the ABE Math Curriculum Matrix is that it's composed of 163 cells. So that's all you're looking at. So it's 163 rectangles. They are divided according to ABE levels. Each domain is color-coded. They're not necessarily the same color coding as the TABE test, because the TABE released their blueprint, and I've noticed they have some color codes for certain for certain domains. So eventually we're going to match the coloring once we get permission from TABE to be able to use their color scheme to mimic our curriculum matrix, but we're not at that point yet. So right now, the color coding, don't be confused between the color coding between the TABE blueprints, TABE 11 and 12 blueprints, and the math matrix, because they're not necessarily correlated. We actually started developing the curriculum matrix prior to the release of those blueprints. So there was not a lot of there was not a chance to coordinate those colors to begin with. And the anchor standards are written as topics and concepts. So what you're going to see is each cell may be one standard alone, or it could be a combination of 2 or more standards from your curriculum, because it's hard for me to incorporate all of those standards together into one massive Excel sheet or one massive PDF file. So I'm going to pause again to answer some of your questions here that I didn't get to see earlier. Yes, so there's one question here, what are the colors for? And you're seeing a color change between the domains. Yes, the color differences are to differentiate between one domain to another, meaning there's a different color for number and number relations versus measurement, and then there's a different color for geometry and things like that. Okay, so where do you obtain a student's NRS level? That's really good. So that's really a good conversation that you need to have If you want to know the correlation between your student's TABE score, and this will differ between what test the student took. So if a student took a TABE 9 and 10 as a pretest, then you need to be looking at a TABE 9 and 10 chart to see what NRS level that student is. And that's probably something I can email to everybody, that chart. All I have is the 11 and 12, meaning the TABE 11 and 12 chart. I have that. I can probably email that to all the participants that attended this training. So you can kind of look at, okay, if I have this particular score in math, what would be my corresponding NRS level? So that's something that I can provide you. Thank you for asking that question. This is a really good question. Yes, so there's one question here that says, is there a chart that will relate the student's TABE scale score with their NRS level? And that's what I'm going to email to you. And then there's one question here that says, where do you access the TABE 11 and 12? So the TABE 11 and 12 blueprint can be downloaded directly from this website. So I hope you're ready with a pen. Write this down. It's tabetest.com. So if you type in tabetest.com, it will bring you to the TABE website. Make sure you're clicking on to TABE 11 and 12. And then once you get into the TABE 11 and 12 page, you will be able to download the blueprints. Keep in mind that the blueprints are divided across subject areas, and they are also separated by level of test. So that's something that's good to keep in mind when you're looking at the blueprint. So go ahead, keep those questions coming. So one thing that I wanted to point out is the different applications of the matrix. So there's different applications of the matrix. Looking at the matrix, you can see, okay, I can teach subject across, I can teach two cells at the same time. I can I can follow a certain particular sequence, whichever is to my liking. As long as you're within that section or that region of NRS level, you are able to structure and sequence your lessons accordingly. So that's something that this map will provide you, that your curriculum framework may be a little bit difficult to use. You can decide you want to do that, or you want to decide, okay, I'll start teaching the first row of the matrix and then go in and start with the second row of the matrix after I finish the first. It's just like teaching something like, okay, well, what if we're teaching place value of two-digit numbers or numbers and counting in particular? So we can teach adding two numbers. So in this case, a visual representation of 3 orange circles plus 2 orange circles, of course, is going to come out to 5. From that adding and subtracting, we can go in and start teaching commutation or commutative property. So if you see what I did, is I simply interchange the images of the orange circles, and see I'm still coming up with 5. So you can start doing that. And then going into the last section, the last cell in bottom right corner of the orange operation in algebraic thinking, this one is now solving an addition and a subtraction equation. So you might want to start already with a variable, or you may start with just a question mark. So if I have 2 circles, how much do I have to add in order to get 5 circles? And then that's how you come up with that. So that's kind of like a quick sequencing of how you would teach across each of the cells through. Another application is a learning trajectory. Learning trajectories are really good, and this is an example of a learning trajectory. You will also get a blank, like a non-colored copy of your matrix. And from there, you can highlight, you can color cells based on what you want to target in terms of teaching. Because not every skill that's listed, or not every standard, your student might not be struggling on some of those standards. So it's just redundant to cover those topics with your class. So a learning trajectory would be really useful when you're trying to do that. So this is an example of a learning trajectory. If you want to know what a learning trajectory is, that's just a content-specific learning path. So for example, I want to teach equations. Where do I start? What is the most foundational skills to equations? And then it builds towards learning how to solve 1 or 2 step equation. So, and there's lots of activity in your activity book that expounds on a learning trajectory. And I'm just going to show you an example of a learning trajectory. And this one is a learning trajectory leading to the understanding of functions. So really, for students, in order for them to understand function, they must master all of the standards pertaining to functions, majority of the standards going into ratios and proportional reasoning, and then start to introduce them the concept of a rate of change. And that's embedded within the ratio and proportions domain, and then move them into equations. So now that they understand what a rate of change is, then I can start teaching them an equation, and from the knowledge of equation, I can build their knowledge of function. So this is like an example of a learning trajectory for you. Well, this is why learning trajectory? Well, students ask us all the time, why are you teaching this stuff? Why do we have to learn this stuff? Or why do we have to practice or work so hard? Why do we have to do it the long way if we have a calculator? Well, that's the question that the trajectory explains, that if your students, unless your students really understand the dynamics into solving a particular equation or working through a particular algorithm in math, they won't really understand the bigger and more complex math concepts, such as the concept of a function. Another thing that I did that you can do with this is an impact indicator. GED has released the high impact indicators. There are the skills that are useful for you to emphasize during your classroom, because it kind of like is an indicator that the students will perform well if they know these skills. So they listed them all down, and there's data that suggests the teachers that this is going to be a good fit for you and it would help your students. So for all of you that are GED teachers, you should not be this should not be a foreign concept to you. We've been talking about high impact indicators into all of our face-to-face GED workshops and webinars. So this is something, and what you can do is to create a trajectory towards this high impact indicators, just like what I'm showing you on the screen right now. In this case, what I'm showing you in this screen is kind of like a sample of a mapping of some of the standards that lead up to Q4 and Q5, the fourth and the fifth high impact indicator, GED high impact indicator for math. Another application of this is you can start grouping mathematics topics and standards that go along with various careers. If we're housed under a career technical college, then we can really cater our curriculum. Now that we see the big picture of the curriculum, now we can pick and choose or group standards together that really pertain to or really target those skills that they're going to need in order to be successful in their particular career and technical fields. Another application is you can use the matrix, the blank matrix. You can start coloring the matrix as you cover topics along in your classroom. So let's say, okay, in this case, middle of the year, I've covered this much in number and operations. I've covered levels 1, 2, and 3 of algebraic thinking, and then I've partially covered NRS level 3 of measurement and data. So it really is a good tracking tool for you as a teacher, and also to keep you as a teacher as to the eye on the prize as to how much you're covering for the amount of time prior to your students' testing. So it's a really good pacing guide for you that you can use. So I really suggest you use the black and white copy of the matrix if you're planning to do this type of application to the use of the matrix. Another thing that I found really, really useful, and I really do suggest, is use the matrix to differentiate your instruction. So for example, you already know which areas your students are struggling with based by looking at your formative assessment data or looking at your standardized or your TABE test report. And you can kind of highlight what skills the students have already mastered in green, and maybe or red would be the skills that your students have not mastered, and then your yellow will be your partial mastery. So you can really dive in and say, okay, if I can get my students to really master these cells in yellow, and I know they're at the cusp of the next, or maybe passing the GED test, or they're like 4 points away from the next NRS level on the TABE test, then you can really target your instruction to hone in on those standards and make a big difference in your students' performance. It's also a tool for you to create to differentiate your instruction for individual students. You can even create small group profiles for your students. So let's say I have a group of 5 students that are at level 2. I want to know where they are and where they're at, so I know what I want to cover with them. You can even go a step beyond that and create individual school profiles for your students, so that you can create, let's say, okay, this is Johnny's performance. How do I help Johnny? What types of activities can I give him? What type of online resources can I lead him into, so that he can master those cells that he has not mastered yet? So really, really powerful assessment tool for you teachers, and I really cannot underscore that enough. On the student side, they can use this as a checklist of topics that they've covered, or homeworks or projects that they're trying to complete. So there is so much that I still have to cover in the curriculum matrix. That's why we divided the matrix into 2 webinars. And so the next webinar, I'm going to be talking about a lot of more things that I did not cover today on part 2. So please tune in next week, Wednesday, June 6th, for part 2 of this matrix, and I will make sure that you have your copy of the matrix by then, your electronic copy of the matrix by then, so you can work with me and go through with me on that. Unfortunately, I already spent a lot of my time answering your questions throughout, and if I have not answered your question at this point, I'm going to answer your question directly through an email. So don't feel bad that I did not answer your question, or like, hey, Ron ignored my question. It's been there for a long time. If I happen to have skipped your question, do not worry. I will email you directly and we can have a one-on-one conversation. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. I'd like to just extend a moment to please fill out our feedback form. So a dialog box is now popping up in your screen. Please click on your responses, just an additional minute. We just wanted to know what you think. Your feedback is really, really important to us. All right. Well, with that said, I wanted to say really thank you so much for tuning into today's webinar. Hopefully you're able to gather some much needed information to get you started into the use of your curriculum matrix. So thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of the afternoon.